The creators of the Pedder Unplugged podcast acknowledge the Palawa people as the traditional owners of the land on which we record in Lutruwita, Tasmania. When we share stories of Lake Pedder, we remember the long tradition of storytelling and its integral cultural role. Acknowledging Lake Pedder's significance and place in the lives of the Palawa has been lost twice, as land once stolen, then flooded. When the lake re-emerges, may the traditional owners be the first to walk the restoring country, to reconnect and rediscover its important place in their living culture. We are back. After a lengthy break, the pod has returned, and we've got a stellar lineup of Lake Pedder stories for you, told by the Pedder people themselves. I'm Tabatha Badger, and jumping straight back in, this week I'll be chatting with the one and only Karen Alexander. She's been chair of Bush Heritage Australia, campaign manager with the Australian Conservation Foundation, and was a founder and is a current board member of WELA. You've possibly caught sight of Karen or heard her voice in the numerous Franklin River films and podcasts that have come out in the last 12 months. She played an integral role in saving the river through her position as lead campaign organiser and establishing the Victorian branch of the Wilderness Society. And as Karen will explain, the main motivating factor was the loss of Lake Pedder. It was particularly special to have this conversation with Karen in the Wilderness Society offices in Hobart. That was the beating centre of the Franklin River campaign. So please, grab a cuppa, welcome back to Pedder Unplugged, and enjoy today's episode with Karen Alexander.
I first went into Lake Pedder, when I was bushwalking in southwest Tasmania I think it was February 1968. This was my first trip with friends from Monash University Bushwalking Club, who had, along with Melbourne Uni Mountaineering Club, southwest Tasmania was the place to go over summer holidays. Neither Victoria nor New South Wales had anything like it. We had wonderful country, but nothing like the wild wilderness, in inverted commas, country which is what we called, of course, then, that was like southwest Tasmania. And you had long trips, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, with what is now banned, of course, quite understandably, airdrops. So you'd be dropping airdrops into Hanging Lake for Federation Peak, airdrops. But you could fly food, of course, into Melaleuca because Denny King was there with the family, and that was fine. So we Lake Pedder came in about the middle of my first trip. So you already had 2 weeks of being in this extraordinary place, southwest, and something happens, certainly for me, and I suspect for most people. The cares of the world, which of course are huge at the age of 18, but the cares of the world have dropped away, whatever university was doing or not doing, whatever things. And somehow the whole environment just is really heightened. I remember feeling how extraordinarily beautiful anything was, like just even, along the Pat Davey track, even a patch of mud might have patterns in it. So when you come up, of course, from that southerly section to Lake Pedder, you're not up high. You're going across the buttongrass plains. You can see in the distance smallish trees, looking beautiful because they're silhouetted because they're up on the dune. You can't see the lake. It's on the other side of that dune. So you came in, and I can't remember exactly, but what I remember is you're coming in. It's a bit boggy, swampy, and you're coming into there, and you get into Mariah Creek. And then you walk out along just next to Mariah Creek, which was beautiful, deep tannin colour, that copper colour, out, and the vista suddenly expands to this enormous beach, and the water in the distance, my memory is that shimmer, It was there. It was quite a ways, probably 300, 400 metres away. Mountains up behind it. The whole place just framed by these mountains. And it was overwhelming. I mean, it was just, you just had to sit. I remember going up a little bit on the dunes. They've got a little bit of perspective and just sitting down and trying to absorb this place because there was no beach like it anywhere in Australia, certainly, and maybe not anywhere because it was so unusual being a relatively flat but whitish valley, glacial formed. So it was, 3K long, and at that stage in the summer especially would be 300 to 400 metres wide, of really flat but just delicate patterns in it coming from the water when it would be wind blown up onto the beach and then back again and so on. And so, the little planes that were not there then, but later on when they flew, and they would be like an ant. We might look at an ant on the sun surface. They were tiny little things. So this vastness, I mean, we talk about, people talk about cathedrals in the West. Mosques are these places, sacred places, in a way of visual representation of that. And they can be beautiful. They're overwhelming in terms of how in heaven's name do you build these things and so on. But they're also, architecturally really fascinating and glorious. And we sit in there and hear a choir and the music resonates. Well, look, to me, it was way, way, way beyond that. So it's hard to give a perspective for people who haven't been there. So we then had 3 or 4 glorious days there, sunny, swimming in Mariah Creek. Olagus Trahanis was there, and so he was climbing up one of the little trees and diving into the creek. And of course, he was very engaging with his stories about the place. And there was mention of the hydro helicopter came in, actually, and it didn't twig with me. I mean, I knew they were talking about possibly damming it, but it just seems so unreal that you would dam someplace like this. So I remember talking with the guy and then saying, can we have a lift? So we went up in that chopper. It was my first ride in a chopper and looked around. That was all very exciting. So really the excitement almost of a child, I mean, I wasn't that much older than a child, of being in this extraordinary place, but clearly really strong impact. And you don't define it at the time. It's just what is. It's just what is. Olagus then told us, a different way to get across to Mount Anne that was a bit shorter than what we were planning, and so on, and come to see him afterwards when we're back in Hobart, which I then followed up because within a couple of years I was living down here in the early 70s to do my geology degree. So the family, Trahanis, became good friends. And then, of course, Olagus died. So I got to know Melva a bit better and the children, but didn't see them that often. And really, I saw Melva a lot more later on, like the last 30 years, really, Yeah. So that visit. So next summer, we came back and did slightly different things, went along the Southern Ranges and again around through Denny's, picked up food, but we wanted to go back to Lake Pedder to again just spend time, and this time to go up higher on the peaks and look out over it and just really explore and get a real sense and more of a sense of a place. Again, the weather was perfect. That morning mist that would come on and then just gradually disperse. I mean, it felt like, golden sort of drops or something that were there. It just added the whole mystique of this extraordinary place. So and then when I came back to live here, I'd be flying in or a couple of times walking in just really for a weekend. So, and the last visit was flying in with Jim England and Richard Bennett, and I think there was someone else, and walking along the beach at night with those friends, feeling like this is the last time. This is the last time. I'm not going to be here. I won't be able to be here. I won't be here to, and feeling this huge sense of loss and devastation. And at that stage, I didn't know, but really probably anger, that showed itself later. So then I finished studying down here, and later, end of the 70s, I'm back in Melbourne. I was off travelling and back in Melbourne, people are talking about the damming of the Franklin. I've sort of blocked out the Pedder stuff. I hardly came back And looking at a photo of the lake and thinking, you bastards, you're not going to get the Franklin as well. Like, it was a deep, deep anger about the loss, unnecessary loss. I mean, we have loss all the time. Things change always. It's the nature of life is really dynamic. So you're always losing things and gaining and so on. But this just seems such a wrong decision to do something that was so beautiful, really. And then, of course, we knew not really necessary. So it was like, well, what sort of values is this in my community? You know? And, of course, the Franklin turned into the same thing. Why would you have such environmental destruction at such huge cost, as in dollar cost? Why would you have that for so little power? What the hell was going on here that these people and the parliament were so in cahoots with each other? No, so that really terrible, and it's still there. Of course, we might call it crony capitalism now. We might call it the vested interests that take over departments and have huge influence. So it's all still there with the fossil fuel industry and forestry. And so on. Yeah, so the Franklin campaign all gets underway, but Pedder, for me, anytime I'd feel like I'm exhausted, I don't know if I can keep going, all I needed to do was look at this little bit of movie footage in the Mike Cordell film that he made of Bob Brown going down the river, going down the Franklin. And I was doing a lot of Cibachrome printing then, so I'd printed for him a photo of Lake Pedder, which he used instead of using archival footage. This was he then could take that photo and show people, and he had some archival footage of the first bulldozers going on the Gordon, blocking the river so that the water coming down the Gordon went off into the tunnel that took it away from the actual dam site, so you could walk on the dam. And I'd look at this and my blood would boil and it would be that right. I'm not done yet. It was, and then of course being with such incredible people, including obviously Bob Brown, but also all the people in Melbourne was a huge motivating thing. But the other indicator of that the Pedder people, as I call them, were really the basis of winning the Franklin campaign was the very first public meeting we had in Melbourne, which was 1st of May 1980. Like, this is 2.5 years before a blockade, before there's any, almost before there's any national media. We were getting busy having meetings and picking out the marginal electorates and where to set up branches and how to support people there. Then that public meeting, and we picked a hall that held like 800 people. We were petrified, oh my God, are we going to get 50, which would make things look a bit bad? And Bob came and spoke, of course, and although it was early days of him, he was quite nervous with it. Peter Thompson, Doug Hill, who represented ACF, and we had the fantastic Paul Smith, Amanda Stark film. Thank goodness we had that, because so few people knew the Franklin. That's not where you went bushwalking, and so few people had actually been down it at that stage. But we had that film so you could show people. We didn't have many materials. I think we had the little enamel badge, and I don't think Jill McCulloch had done her first poster, So we really didn't have very much to show people the Franklin except that film. So it's like half an hour before Story Hall there at RMIT, and people start arriving, and they're arriving and arriving, and by 1:45 the place was packed. And by the time that it starts, it's got, like, we are standing room only. And I do remember thinking, God, I hope this is a strong building, because it was a lot of people. Yeah. And thought, Pedder people pissed off, wanting to act. Only it's less than 10 years later, so really.
Yeah. And this is in Victoria as well, not Tasmania.
It's Victoria, and it's bushwalkers, but it's others too who, of course, the Pedder campaign was national, but it was fairly late in the piece that it became national and public. So those people were, even if not involved, and many of them were, and so on, they knew about it. And they were bushwalkers, but they were also artists and all sorts of other people who just knew, who had a value system, that said, well, you keep these things. Yeah. This is part of us, these places. And so seeing that, I thought, we'll win this campaign. It'll take a lot of effort, but we will really be able to push at the national level to win this campaign, provided, I don't think I even thought provided, I just thought we'll win. It was,
Is that like one of the main lessons that you learned personally from Pedder was that it didn't go nationally quick enough, and that sort of helped motivate you to set up the Victorian branch of the Wilderness Society, or was that
no,
just
I would have been aware of that, but I wasn't the main motivating thing. The motivating thing was the fact that's where I was living.
Yeah.
I was angry about the loss of Pedder. There were some other people, Ross Scott, John Terrell, Theo Dreyer, Mark Blakers, that were already meeting. And so when I got to there, they'd had a couple of meetings, and they were just meeting as a group and saying, okay, what do we do? What do we do? And we just gradually expanded that group. So Louise Gilfedder and Steve Bennett started coming along, and we'd meet I think every Monday night.
Yeah.
And then we got an office, and then we had the meeting, and then things, then we got a shop, and so it all happened fairly quickly in that next 12 months was things were, and then people, and then we were going out talking to bushwalking and field naturalist groups and others or friends of groups saying, would you like us to come and do a presentation? We'll have a public meeting. Would you support us to have a public meeting, or would you like us to come and talk with you? And the response was really strong. You didn't have to persuade. Yes, yes, yes. So there'd be public meetings, smallish public meetings in the Blackburn High School hall, and you'd show the film and people would come, and there'd be stalls and so, and you just built the numbers really quickly. And then you'd support whoever was in those local groups who wanted to work on it, to have materials, to whatever there was, and then we had the newsletter, and so getting members, no emails, of course, getting members, which meant you could then send them the newsletters, getting addresses, having petitions, not because petitions were much used, but it was a way of getting addresses.
Yeah.
You got names and addresses and so on. And fine, the petitions would get used.
Yeah.
And then I think the other key thing was, recognising that marginal electorates would be really key, and then going to Liberal Party and Labor Party branches, getting the list of those branches and writing to them saying, we can come and talk to you about this issue, just let us know. And we got really strong response, including from Liberal Party branches, which were already feeling pissed off with the Liberal Party. I remember this woman saying to me, when nobody takes any notice of us these days, we're just here for fundraising, apparently. Like, really? Anyway, they were good. They were all good, because it was really, the environment was part of the old Liberal philosophy, conservative, you conserve, look after, which is where Malcolm Fraser came from. And he would have liked to have saved the Franklin.
Yeah.
I know only from his biography. So it's, so all those things. So the response was strong, and I really feel the response was there largely, not necessarily totally, because of Pedder. Whatever it is about that place, something, that atmosphere and whatever, motivated people, even though lots of those people hadn't been to Pedder. Yeah. But they'd seen it. They'd seen the photos, because they were, good photos. They knew about the issue, and it was wrong to flood something like that.
A lot of people consider Lake Pedder as a bit of a sanctuary and a really safe place. Is that sort of the feeling that it held when you did get there in the middle of these, really long trips?
Yeah, it did feel like a safe place. Well, I guess because you could retreat from the weather. There's little weather. Is it going to snow? What's the wind going to be like? Of course, those things could come there, but you weren't going to be blown off the mountain, I suppose. And then also by 68, the Strathgordon Road was in. It had only come in the previous couple of years, funded by the federal government. And so that really was only like a 3-hour walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So out. So I guess in that way, even if you weren't really thinking of it, you knew you had easy access out if something happened. And then what was, you're fairly safe walking along a beach.
Yeah.
Like that. You might get hit by a small plane, but it's like that you're fairly. So I guess it did. You're right. It's interesting. And I guess it also physically was a bit like a cradle, with the mountains either side, without them being, they're a fair way away, and they're not hugely, not sort of ginormous 8,000-metre things or something. And it's so it felt like almost a human scale landscape that was actually welcoming, embracing maybe, people. That's a really interesting perspective to think, what did it mean when it felt safe? Because it did.
the other thing we can often ask if there's a particular landscape in Tasmania, very specifically, that they feel has a certain strength or pull to it, or that you feel is inhabited by another, as though you are, part of a living ancient landscape. And Lake Pedder is definitely somewhere that a lot of people identify, along with the South Coast Track and that whole region as well. Is that something that you share?
That's interesting. Lake Pedder, yes. Yeah. I think an ancient landscape, I would be thinking Gondwana land and vegetation that really, to me, represented that or had. So it might even be Central Plateau. I really would think of the Central Plateau linked across to New Zealand, linked across to South America. It's interesting people think of the South Coast, because I don't think of that. I think partly because really, like 10,000 years ago, that sea level was so much lower.
Yeah.
So that feels very recent. This is my geology perspective. That is a really recent change. Whereas Pedder, in fact, wasn't affected by that. Yeah. So in a way that does feel a lot older. Yeah, all the mountain, like Western Arthurs, Eastern Arthurs, those ones. So they wouldn't, and they link into the, like, so strongly a glacial time. So that's Ice Age time, these arrests and cirques and now lakes and things really link strongly back into that. And the Central Plateau does too, that sort of ice cap that was on there and the way it scraped across things and so on. So that's what that meant. But that's not very long ago. That's 10 to 100,000 years ago. Yeah. It's geologically, it's just yesterday. That's one of the wonderful things on studying geology, was this time perspective, that things flow when today we don't think of them as like rocks. It's like a rock thing, well, it doesn't flow, but it does over time.
Something that we overlook so much. I was having a conversation at the University of Tasmania last week on Pedder pennies, and how unique they are. If that was a flora or fauna species, it would hold a lot more regard, but because it's just a rock, it's so overlooked. Really fascinating. I like the Central Plateau analogy as well, because I think if you're walking between the pencil pines, and even if they're very skeletal and have been, I guess, more recently affected by fires, but you still feel like they've got another sort of belonging. It's like you're walking with your friends or something.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
It is a lovely thing, that thing. Like walking with your friends, that's a great expression, because you see it and you think, oh, hello. Yeah. That is a sense. And then, oh, look, you're very beautiful. Look at that.
They've all got their own little characteristics.
Yeah.
You were just at university at the time that Pedder was flooded. So what action did you take? What were you involved in?
Attending meetings, public meetings, seeing those slideshows. I did go into what was the new Environment Centre that Lee Holloway, and I presume Kevin, I just don't remember Lee, and asked what I could do. And Lee had said, perhaps you could write an article. And at that stage in my life, writing was really challenging. And I remember walking out thinking, I can't do that. And I didn't go back. It was a very interesting lesson for me later on in the Franklin campaign of how do you support a volunteer to be a volunteer. I mean, we're all volunteers, but, how do someone comes in and says, I'd like to help. Right, let's sit down and have a cup of coffee and let's talk about, what it is you think you'd like to do, what your background is, what do you feel your skills are that you might offer, and how often might you come, like really supportive as much as you can. People who are incredibly busy said, I just want to fold newsletters. I don't want any. I'm really happy to spend 2 hours a week on Monday nights folding newsletters. Well, we needed those people. Having other bits of engagement, but definitely I can help with that. I'll be at that stall, or that type of engagement. Partly because I wanted to get this damn degree, and partly was I wouldn't have had the confidence to do anything more than that. Really, I mean, I think that saying no to a Lakers come onto the committee was much more to do with confidence than it was to do with really saying I must get my degree. That was the way out of it. It's really good when you invite younger people into a group and make sure they have the support to be to participate. Yeah, that was a whole that I realised that all my lack of confidence at that time and so on actually was also quite good. That said that when you don't do something very well and you reflect on it, you learn a lot. So I think it really, really helped because and then, of course, I'd gone travelling and I'd also worked in the park service in Victoria, so all that builds confidence and dealing with strange people and trying to make your way as this sort of young female in a sort of fairly male-dominated world and looking at these things, but not understanding the patriarchy or the systems working against you at all, which is why I'm now really involved in Women's Environmental Leadership Australia in WELA. Like that to me is really critical stuff. Like women must be in there. Many women, not all, many women do it really differently and will be more supportive and collaborative, and if they've also got the skills to push what are seen as more leadership things, then that can only be for the better. I became campaigns director at ACF and really I really didn't understand all the pressures that were going to be on me and how to do them. I just worked ridiculously hard and burnt myself out, so that was a lesson as well. Yeah, so the Pedder, I didn't really do much more than those sorts of things and then learned from them though.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing in a way.
That's the most critical thing, that what that
was
led
for
to
me
a decade later.
It was for me a critical thing. And I guess too the joy of realising that this being with these people and working with this was truly something even though I didn't say, I want to do this, what I want to do, because I didn't. I went on and worked in park service and so on, but it's recognising there was somewhere when could get going in 79 with the others, knowing that this would be good, knowing that these people were fantastic. No money, mind you, no income, but I'd saved a whole lot of money when I was working in the park service and so on, so I could just live off that for almost, over 2 years, which was a bit silly because I should have bought a house, I was thinking, which is, again, one of those aspects of young people getting involved. It's fantastic. However, what is it also going to mean for them in the long term? Because, I didn't think long term. Retirement, what are you talking about? Yeah. But it's actually it's really quite, and older people need to step in and say, hey, think about this really seriously. Just think about it because it will help set you up for later and therefore you can continue your campaigning.
Yes.
But more financially secure.
We often see, if it's the Lake Pedder campaign or the Franklin campaign, you've got the figureheads at the front that people kind of attribute the success of the campaign to, but it's everybody back that, they're the people on Monday nights folding newsletters and just doing whatever is necessary to make it happen. That is really, one of the biggest components to winning the campaign, or the biggest, because without them,
totally essential.
You've got nothing. Yeah. And they're the people, volunteering, and they've got whatever else going on in your life. Were there many key relationships through Lake Pedder that you forged that were, I guess, the primary relationships that you built on for the Franklin campaign?
Well, because I was here for the for the Pedder campaign, so I guess getting to know Lee, but not really well because I didn't go back into that office. The Trahanas family were quite key. It was really, I didn't get to know, but it was really very special to have it as almost like an association with, or see people like Clive Sansom and others, Brenda Heen and so on, operating, or just seeing them in more public positions. I guess that was really special, and I think as role models, maybe, without me really quite being aware of it, seeing those people. And was it Walker? Dr.
Walker?
Yeah. And Jessie Luckman, and it's just really, and Jessie I got to know better because after the Franklin campaign, Wilderness Society, and I was the key person, made 6 films on wilderness areas around the whole of Australia. And so, and we made one based around Denny King in southwest Tasmania with 2 sort of wacky story, but it did help illustrate wild country of 2 very, very good hang gliders going up to Federation Peak, not the top, but near Hanging Lake, and hang gliding off down into the old river valley. And we took Denny and Jessie, both of whom were in their 70s, took them up there as a way of having this older, more experienced person, both of them, very different perspectives, but really interesting perspectives. there. And also we did quite a lot of filming around Melaleuca, and Dave Watts, photographer, and orange-bellied parrots, etc. Yeah, so I guess so some of those people then who would have met during the Pedder when I was able to contact, but they would have been contactable at any rate. I think the main thing was getting to know those people in Melbourne. When I came to Melbourne, seeing those people, knowing that we had this connection to Pedder and the fight for Pedder. People I mentioned like Gwyneth Taylor and Bob Disraeli and Les Southwell, and there were quite a few of them who would come in and help and do all sorts of things at the public meetings, or just come in and help. So that way there was a really strong link between the Pedder campaign. Well, I remember Bob Brown saying it's really good to put the posters up for public meetings, as many places as possible and so on. It doesn't matter even if they become out of date, because people see and there's an address or there's a way of contacting and getting in, and they'll be there for another month before they might get cut down. Yeah, so that thing was the social media of the day. It was stickers stuck on home things. And it was fun finding places that you'd put up posters and stuff for the Franklin that was sort of out of the way. People couldn't pull it down so easily or cover it up or anything like that. And you had to watch out for the police because it was illegal to put stuff in those places. And so on. But I mean, not that they were, I wasn't arrested. It was like pulled over when we were doing something and went through the magistrate's court on a community bond and, but, it was actually the benefit of them being in the middle class. I rang this friend who was a lawyer and somebody else who knew the head of the Law Institute. I said, what happens in this case? They just said, you go in, you're very humbled, abject sorrow that you had ever done such a terrible thing. You will never do it again and get caught. No, and you'll never do it again. And they'll let you off with, especially in your background, no prior convictions and whatever. And the magistrate will probably have a little smile on his face, or her face, probably only his. And so that's how you get off it. So I did all that. Didn't hear about it again. Yeah. But I realised, oh my God, what a benefit in coming from the middle class. Those people. I didn't know this system, but I could easily get told about it.
Yeah. So with your geologist hat on, the Edgar Fault Line, which is still visible from a lot of places. I think even Red Knoll, not far from Scotts Peak Dam, certainly Mount Anne, and towards the Western Arthurs along the Port Davey track, any elevated area, and you can see the escarpment quite clearly. Obviously, it's revegetated because it hasn't moved in quite a while.
So it must be about to move again, surely.
Well, funny that. What do they say? Every 20,000 or 20 million years or something, and it's been 18 of either of those variables since it's the last moved. And two of the dams, Edgar, of course, and Scotts Peak, are built on and adjacent to the fault line. I mean, not being an engineer, that still seems pretty silly. So now there's
what common sense is that?
I know. And climate change exacerbating, how the Earth's plates are moving. Impoundments put pressure on Earth's plates, which then could create further movement and technology. Of course, we're learning a lot more about seismic activity in Australia. So the dams require what's inflated to over $100 million in contemporary safety upgrades. But, of course, nothing can prevent a dam on a fault line from failing. That's pretty obvious for anyone. But it gives a really good impetus to reinvest that money into restoring Pedder over prolonging the life of these, what are quickly becoming very redundant assets. And it's two questions in that. Have you spent much time at the Pedder impoundment? And, I guess in an ideal world, how do you see the restoration of Pedder? It's inevitable in one form or another, but how that might,
I hope it's in a better form and not because the dam has failed and flooded down the river.
Yes.
I mean, what a disaster that would be. I found it really challenging to go back there. Going out even on the Strathgordon Road and seeing this sign that said Lake Pedder, and I just, for the first time, felt like vandalising something. I'd never really felt that before. Lake Pedder, like I was so, this is not Lake Pedder. What are you, So this really strong reaction to that. I did go out to Mount Solitary with Mike Emery. We just got this funny little inflatables and went out and camped on Mount Solitary. And in the morning, when we woke up, the whole valley was filled with mist, and I felt this huge sense of relief. I could not see that lake. I could not see that dam. It was filled up with mist, and so it's like, this is affecting me a bit. So really, I have not chosen. And whenever somebody sends like a photo from up on Mount Anne, and I don't think I've gone up. Oh, and I have gone since the day. When I left Hobart in mid-74, so it was already flooded. I went up had a fantastic day. It was the middle of winter, fantastic, sunny, freezing cold day trip, up snow all over Mount Anne, and it was a really glorious day. But that damn impoundment was there, constantly reminding one of the loss and so on. And it was in many ways, I just wanted to quarantine it right this mountain. I'm not going to look to the west, which is very difficult when you're coming down the hill. So that was all. I realised I was absolutely and utterly avoiding going anywhere where I could see it. And when people send me photos, as someone did the other day, they'd all gone up Mount Anne and sent a photo and here's this. And I said, look at Lake Pedder. I said, it's not Lake Pedder. Just call it fake Pedder. It's a Pedder in a way, I suppose, if it has to be, but it's fake Pedder. Just remember that. So I still will, anyone that sends that stuff, that sends anything that says Lake Pedder, no, it's not Lake Pedder. Lake Pedder's there, but you can't see it, but it's fake Pedder. And please, you should join. You should link in the Restore Pedder campaign. So bushwalkers who've got used to it, a bit like the friend I was saying who said, oh, look, why would bother with Pedder? He's been quite a keen bushwalker. Like he wouldn't be seeing it in that way, the way I do, and way I'm sure lots of other people do. No. And I know it would have its own beauty, etc. I mean, lots of things do, but it's not when it's built on such a shocking, unnecessary decision, such a death, basically, not quite. What do you call it? It's not a death. In one way, it's a death of the lake for a while. It's going to be reborn, restored.
Yeah, it was huge environmental vandalism. One of the, biggest environmental mistakes or things that we've made.
Yeah, and so unnecessary. I mean, the timber stuff in a way it's shocking. It's absolutely unnecessary. The cutting of those olives is totally terrible. You can't actually restore them unless you're talking 500 years or something. You don't just replant. As in the Giants, Tom May, the mycologist, says you can't get a flat pack from IKEA for a forest, You can't just plant it. This is really complicated, old system here that is not replaceable except over a really long time. So it's otherwise it's a good expression. I must remember it. You can't get a flat pack for the forest.
It's kind of cool. You almost can for Pedder. Yeah. Kevin Kiernan, obviously, geomorphologist, talks, about the 60,000 years of evolution that made this beautiful place. So the 50 years that you talk about that it's been underwater are completely minute, let alone the first decade of initial rehabilitation of the area. It's only going to be a 1 to 2 normal rainfall seasons that the small amount of sediment that's on the beach wash away. And that
I gather tiny.
It's like a complete miracle that it's even possible to restore it. So there's sort of a moral duty to do so because it is possible.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to say, not quite recognising, almost like a denial of feeling or mourning that lake. I've often found wherever I bushwalk in Tasmania, you just get that uplifting sense, and you touched on it. To begin with, every other care or responsibility disappears, and your only operative is being there in that moment in this magnificent wild place. Whenever I go around the Pedder impoundment, I always feel really sad or I'm angry and I'm annoyed. And I was thinking about it over summer. We had a paddle for Pedder event out there, and I was just really pissed off. And I was like, why?
Yes.
Such a beautiful day. It's great conditions. Actually, you know what? Every time I feel like this, it's only here around the impoundment, and perhaps that's my own sense of
when you know what's possible, and you've seen what's lost, as in visually in some way, even if it's not the real thing, and you've now got a sense of it.
And
and And also, the stupidity of the decision and the possibility of it being restored, because essentially, oh my goodness, that beach is still there, the dune is still there. I remember when Doug Hawley, who was the public service in Melbourne, still is, but he was the pilot. He did a lot of small plane flying during the blockade, and people back and forth, and several years later, he rang me and said, Karen, I've just flew over the impoundment, bringing someone back or whatever, I don't know, flying. And he said, I could see, looking down, a slightly lighter colour down, must have been just the way the light was where the beach was. He said it was just slightly, after all, it's not that far down, and even though it's tannin water, he said, I could see this lighter colour. So I could see the beach. He was so excited. He said, I just wanted to tell you, you could see the beach, waiting to be exposed.
Yeah. Oh, wow, what an experience.
I know, really. He just said it was, and in a way it sort of said, yes, it's there. I mean, we know it's there because for divers, but it was like, yes, it's there. It'll happen. We'll restore it. There'll be a more sensible governments and whatever. There'll be decisions and the community's pushing. So at some stage it will happen. It will happen.
What a way to start a whole new season of the podcast with Karen Alexander. You can find out more about the Restore Lake Pedder campaign and the various organisations that Karen's involved in via the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us and listening, and we can't wait to bring you more episodes in this latest season. I'm Tabatha Badger, and thanks for listening to Pedder Unplugged.